Treasure map is just the beginning of the next thing. It's an open-ended question that you as the reader or you as the adventurer have the opportunity to try finding an answer to.
Welcome back, guys, to the Men's Adventure Fiction Podcast. I have to start off the same way I feel like starting off every time, with just the gratitude for everyone who's here watching. It's been just amazing to connect with you, whether it's on the comments, on Instagram, on the Discord. Things have gotten so deep lately. We've talked about like the father effect and, looking up to heroes as a kid. This has become something that's really improving my life greatly. So I appreciate you all for being a part of that. And I just wanted to say thank you and welcome to both you guys here with me tonight. How are you guys doing?
Good. Very
Living the
excited.
dream.
Very excited to have our second guest here with Terrance Layhew, the metaphorical haberdasher himself from the Suit Up podcast, among other things. He's on here today to talk a little men's adventure fiction for the podcast, and it's going to feature some of his own writing, One Man's Treasure, which comes out, I believe when this goes live, it'll actually come out 2 days prior. So congratulations on a published book, man. You want to tell
Thank
us a
you.
little bit about it? Give us a little bit of information on yourself so everyone knows who you are.
My name's Terrance Layhew. I joke I'm a professional writer, amateur swashbuckler. I enjoy men's adventure fiction very much. And this is my love note to the things that I enjoyed as a kid. Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth has always been one of my favorite stories. And I took some elements of what I loved about that. Treasure Islands was Family Robinson, and I created One Man's Treasure, which is the story of two brothers who win a treasure map in a poker game, and then the unfortunate events that come after that.
Yeah, it is very fun, very entertaining. Really cool idea to give a first person narrative from both brothers' point of views. I really liked that. It reminded me a little bit of one of my favorite, two of my favorite characters of all time, Shel Scott and Chester Drum, which
Mhm.
I've talked about on this podcast multiple times. But their 20th book is a combination of both of them, and
Oh,
every other chapter, somewhere thereabout, switches first person perspective to the other one. So I was reading that, I was like, man, this is, I don't know why more writers don't do that, and it's cool to see you do it. So very well done.
And you're able to give the voices, a nice distinction. It's not
thank
like,
you.
oh, I'm reading the same person both times. These guys are two very different individuals who see the world very differently, and it's great because each character is strong in their own right, and then when they come together and you see the chemistry and the balance and bounce off between them and the butting heads, it's fun. It's a great read that you guys have to pick up if you're a fan of men's adventure fiction, and
Yeah.
especially just for the cover alone. Look at that thing.
Oh yeah,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
that's what, you got the swashbuckling down, dude. Well done. Very, very well
Thank
done.
you.
We'll put a link in the description or the show notes so you guys can check it out.
Appreciate it.
And what we're gonna kind of use as a touch point for today's conversation is King Solomon's Mines and its author. What is his name? Because I am the guy who has only read King Solomon's Mines and has not done a deep dive. What is something Haggard,
H.
right?
Rider Haggard. Yeah.
H. Rider
Mhm.
Haggard. Okay, I knew I was gonna forget it, and I did. So, yeah, I've only read King Solomon's Mines and watched the film. But
Mhm.
Terrence, what is your kind of relationship with this writer and his works?
So much like Nathaniel, my start was this great illustrated classics edition, had this sick cover. I wonder where it started. Of just it entranced me as a kid, and I love the story because it's just a straight adventure story. They have the treasure map, they go for it, and that's it hit the right itch as a kid. Before I even watched Indiana Jones, read any of the books, I discovered H. Rider Haggard. And I don't know, somewhere in my teens, I discovered that there was more than just King Solomon's Mines, because most people talk about just King Solomon's Mines. Turns out H. Rider Haggard was an extremely prolific author. And not only did he write King Solomon's Mines, he wrote a sequel, Alan Quatermain, that then became a long series of like 9 books all about Alan Quatermain and his adventures. And then he also had some that were like crossovers with his other historical fiction. And he even has a book that's like set in the medieval period that's kind of strange. Weirdly enough, it's also between two brothers. And I'm
Huh.
realizing I may have stolen from that when I wrote One Man's Treasure, but that
That's funny.
let's leave leave that idea alone. But I've been reading these books since I was just a wee little lad, and it was the dawn of my adventuring.
That's
That's
awesome.
so cool. So he was the Kickstarter, huh? This was the first dive into this genre. That's really cool. That's exciting. Sorry for
Well, and
butchering his
it's
name then.
appropriate because he's kind of the adventure story. Before we get any of the other things that we think of as adventure fiction in the like wearing a fedora character,
Hmm.
we get Alan Quatermain and H. Rider Haggard stories about him.
Yeah, that's something that I had not read much of his stuff until we knew we were going to do this, and then I read King Solomon's Mines, Alan Quatermain, and then Marie, which is essentially a prequel, right? It takes place like
Hmm.
fun fact about King Solomon's Mines and Alan Quatermain that I did not know is he's 60 in King Solomon's Mines, right?
Yep.
Dude, we could do a whole episode on that fact alone. If I'm searching for King Solomon's Mines when I'm 60, I want you guys to give me an award or something. You maybe you don't even need to give me an award because doing that will be the award. That's incredible. That's so badass. I was thinking about that the whole time because you don't realize that until in Alan Quatermain when
Hmm.
it's like 3 years later and he says something like, "Fellas, I'm bored of living the high life off of all the diamonds we got in King Solomon's mine." Rough paraphrase. He's not American, so it wouldn't have sounded anything like that. He's like, "I'm 63 now, and that was only 3 years ago. We need to get back out there." And I was like, "Wait a minute, Alan, slow down. You're 63 years old. That's sick. That's like Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is 62 and he's hanging off of buildings and climbing, hanging off of planes, jumping across gaps and breaking his ankle." So if you get nothing else from this episode, glean that stay in good enough shape to go search for treasure in the African jungles when you're in your 60s. So
From your lips to God's ears.
Right.
yes.
I did not realize that because, like I said, I only got King Solomon's Mines so far. And yeah, I don't think I realized that he was that old, but that's super impressive. And even more impressive is, like you said, this has kind of become the archetypal adventure story. Like it was maybe something like Treasure Island may predate it, but
Hmm.
it doesn't
Yep.
even do it the same way
Yeah.
Hmm.
Alan Quartermain does it. Alan Quartermain, like it feels more contemporary than Treasure Island, of course. And so, yeah, I'm kind of like shocked, honestly, that we don't talk about. I'm not you guys in particular, but in as a public, like, why is he not talked about more as a character? Why have I not really heard the name too often in my own life? And maybe I'm just an anomaly, but I feel like he deserves a little bit more credit for kind of starting this whole thing off.
Yeah. Which would This is a question for you, Terrence. Do you
Hmm.
I don't know the history on him as much. So you said this book was written in 1885, King Solomon's Mines was?
Yeah.
So that's during cowboy times for
Yeah.
one. But then the second question I had was, is he considered, does he kind of fall under this whole pulp overview, or is he more of a classic literature guy? Because he blends the men's
Hmm.
adventure fiction and the classic literature very well. So
Hmm.
what do you think?
I think that if you look him up, like the category of King Solomon's Mines, it's considered classic now,
Okay.
but that's only because it's lasted as long as it has. It's kind of the same concept as, okay, The Great Gatsby is a crime fiction story,
Yeah.
even though now we consider it like high literature.
Mm-hmm.
It's through circumstance has been elevated to a different category, even though it was popular fiction of its time.
Gotcha.
And I would make the argument that most people that then, when the pulp started getting made, this was the thing that helped inspire a lot of those stories.
Very cool. I have the it's by Otto Penzler and it's the big book
Hmm.
of pulp adventure fiction, and
Hmm.
it's got a sick cover. It's got like one dude's like trussed up. Of course, he's not wearing a shirt. Classic pulps. He's like trussed up
Hmm.
on like a little altar stake cross situation, and then another dude's like fighting off a bunch of naked chicks, native girls who are trying to kill him. It's like, wow, this is the big book of pulp adventure. I don't know what else to say about that. But in the intro, I think it's by Otto Penzler. He talks about She by H. Rider Haggard, and he says that that was a
Hmm.
formative book for him, um, which made me think that this was actually a like H. Rider Haggard was considered a pulp author. But then, like you said, I guess it's just the longevity that you get, that you're ending up lasting so long that they're like, it doesn't matter what you wrote, it's a classic now. But yeah, that's very interesting thought there.
I,
Alexander Dumas.
that was exactly where I was going to
Yeah,
go.
that's
Dumas was
interesting
the
though.
pulp of his time,
Yeah,
but because he's lasted long enough, we consider like three of his books essential classics, only one of which I think most people will have read.
So it would be Three Musketeers, Count
Hmm.
of Monte Cristo, and
Yep. Man in the Iron Mask. Those are the three books that most people can
yeah,
go, oh, that's Alexander Dumas.
yeah, very cool.
yeah, and he
Um,
literally was serializing these stories in a
Hmm.
newspaper, and then like that's as pulp as he gets, right? These adventure stories serialized. Was Quartermain serialized or was he novel?
I think it was a novel right
Yeah,
from the start. And it wouldn't surprise me though if later on. So there's one of the collections. So I've got my volume
oh nice.
one of a 7 volume set. I have 6 volumes. I need to order the seventh. But the second in I think one of the other ones, there's like 4 short stories that they wrote. I wonder if those would have been published in like The Strand or one of the magazines
uh-huh.
in the wake of the popularity of the first 2 books because he wrote those short stories after the first 2 novels.
Very interesting.
They were huge, like you said, popular fiction. Like the Quartermain books from when I was looking it up, like the King Solomon's Mines in particular, when he put that out, it was huge and immediately successful, and it sold like crazy. And that, I guess, what is an interesting thing to me is that in a some way or in some small way, we are reading the same or watching the same story play out over and over and over and over again when we watch this
Mhm.
genre of treasure hunting. And like, what makes that so interesting that it's sold at the time, and that if you throw an Indiana Jones movie up with a treasure map and something for him to find MacGuffin wise, why does that resonate still? I'm interested to hear from you, Terrence, and you as well, Nathaniel. Like, what do you think this is?
Guest first.
Absolutely.
How convenient. I think that it's that innate sense of discovery, and that's part of why this era just fits so well for it, because it's discovering something that was unknown before, that part of us that has inherent curiosity, that wants to solve a puzzle, that there's a question. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that why we write cliffhangers for books? Is we end on that note of suspense. A treasure map is just the beginning of the next thing. It's an open-ended question that you as the reader or you as the adventurer have the opportunity to try finding an answer to.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Really well said.
Well, and that hits something that has been very like heavy on my heart for the past 2 or 3 years, trying to find some sort of career path. I personally believe that I was like made to be an explorer or an adventurer, and that's so that your point of saying this time period works so perfectly. Our current time period is very challenging to think of doing that. Like to be a treasure hunter or to be anyone who's going to find lost places. I mean, even just thinking of what 200 years ago when they first
Mhm.
started moving to the west of America, like there was uncharted land that had never been found by those people. There were Native American there before, but even some of them probably hadn't discovered all that there was to see. So I think there's something, and I don't know that it's innate necessarily just to a man's heart, but I think it is
Mhm.
found much more often in men, is that like desire to go find something that has never been found before. And then I think that's compounded when it's like guaranteed to be riches, right? Like I'm gonna go find a treasure that nobody's found for so long, and then there's this like cool pirate who hit it, and that's also like sick. And that kind of we get into a little bit of that here, and then you're kind of like transition back to this lineage of adventurers and explorers, and now you have a hand in play to find this treasure. And to see that also from the other side, like reading through this book, reading through uh, the Gabriel Hunt books, reading,
Hmm.
watching Indiana Jones, you're now pulled in as the adventurer yourself, even though you're just watching it. I mean, that's what good, entertaining fiction is in a sense escapism, and it hits you in the heart where you finish watching, you're like, man, I wish I was still 13 and could go play outside with my friends and like recreate this movie together, you know. That's a really good question. Do you have an answer, Luke, that you thought about?
Well, I was thinking I want to just grab some popcorn and listen to you guys talk all day. It's just great. I just learned so much. Like I was just that's the type of college class I want to sit in. It's just this I learned so much. Where Terrance, what you were saying made me think, okay, and I'm gonna have to like put more thought into this and think about this longer. But what you were saying, like the discovery of a treasure, and it almost feels like what the detective novel
Hmm.
scratches in certain people, like wanting to understand the world
Mm,
and being able to figure things out. And then like the competency angle, Nathaniel, for like men, like you said, being able to
Hmm.
provide or being able to like have this worth. Because unfortunately, one of the negative things about like us men and our mindsets is like we're really driven about success and money and that kind of stuff like that is important to
Hmm.
us. And we, I know I feel that way. If I'm making money, then I feel up here. And if I'm not, I feel like I'm worth less. And that's not great. It's just what it is. And um, yeah, that aspect of being able to be brave enough, to be rugged enough, to go out there and search and find it, there's got to be something psychological happening with both of those answers that
yeah.
I'm really gonna want to sit and just like ruminate with. So I appreciate both of you for saying that. That was really awesome.
Yeah. Well, and that's another really cool thing about Quartermain that I wish we had. I right now, I'm going to go on record and say if you like Spencer Dutton, you should read the Alan Quartermain books because there's
Yes.
definitely some Spencer Dutton DNA in there. He starts out as a hunter, and that's kind of a cool thing that they do with him too. Is like King Solomon's Mines is definitely about treasure hunting, but they also give you this character, and of his own volition, he would say that he is not necessarily the bravest person. He even says, "I'm
Hmm.
a coward" two or three times, and then it's Henry. What's his
Henry
last?
Curtis.
Yeah, dude, what an absolute unit of a man he is. That's what's so funny about those books is like you're almost is Henry Curtis the main character? You're reading it, and he's
Hmm.
like just this absolutely stacked to the gills monster of a man who's got like Viking heritage, maybe, and then he just
It's like a
swings a
Norwegian,
battle
right?
axe. Yeah, swings a battle axe the whole book. It's like, dude, this is epic. um, but all that is to say, they did a good job of writing Quartermain to be put into these positions. He's literally just
Hmm.
an explorer, but his beat kind of is Africa. So being like the greatest shot in Africa gives him the
Hmm.
ability to take these people on these adventures and get caught up in all sorts of other adventures. So I think that was a really smart move from Haggard there.
One thing I would love to see, like, if the Spencer Dutton craze actually helps this happen, Hollywood producers watching this episode, looking at optioning these guys' work, A, do it. B, please give me the mini series like prestige television show of the life of Alan Quatermain. And because these books span, like there's 7 books, you could get 7 seasons of great content. Do a little editing. So because this is colonial Britain, we don't want to get this show canceled.
Yeah,
But we need to have like the beginning of Alan Quatermain and Mary, and then span his entire life to the point where we get at the end, like the Last Kingdom series did with the story of Uhtred of Ebbenburg. I want to see that for the story of Alan Quatermain from the prequels, which is basically everything after Alan Quatermain, which is like
yeah,
5 more books, to then King Solomon's Mines and the crescendo of Alan Quatermain as his end. I would
yeah.
love to see like the good Netflix prestige television miniseries version of this.
Well, how do you feel about writing screenplays? Because there's nobody better for the job than yourself, honestly. That sounds great, but don't let anybody ruin it. I feel like you got the vision. You know what you want to do with that. You should, yeah, maybe option
He
it
is in the
yourself,
public
right?
Well,
You
there you
should.
go. And that's kind of ties back too to what we were talking about on your podcast with how good and bad the King Solomon Mine movie is. It's like we were so close to having something that kind of stuck to the script of that book. Then we got something very different, but also very entertaining. So it would be so cool to see this come together. And I think you're so right. A mini series, a 7 season series would be perfect. And it would be fun to see maybe in the comments, if you're familiar with Alan Quartermain, tell us who you think could play young Alan and old Alan and middle aged Alan, or if they would have to do the CGI where they de-age or re-age him up or whatever. I guess they've got makeup to age him up, but that's a really good idea. You should definitely Hollywood producers pay attention. This guy's on to something.
And it's interesting that they don't, you know, do something like that because even looking at our own super anecdotal evidence of just anytime you mention the name Spencer Dutton, and everyone's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I wish the show was about Spencer Dutton." Everyone wants more Spencer Dutton, clearly. And what he, like you said, where he comes from. Now that I'm learning, you know, and reading this character for the first time, like yeah, those big game hunting scenes from the first opening chapters, like this could be a Spencer Dutton scene stripped straight from 1923, and it was written like you said in 1880 something by by Haggard, and we could just pull from that well and give people what they want and revive this hero, you know, and keep him from going the way of like only memories of the movie coming up. Because I feel like for a lot of people it might be like for myself, I probably vaguely knew there was a book, but if you said King Solomon's Mines to me, I was going to think of that 1980s film.
Think it's in part because there is that disconnect between main character and actual character. Like you said, Henry Curtis is an absolute unit. The story, more or less, he should be the main character by all rights. And when
Right.
they make an adaptation, they want to make Alan Quartermain this He-Man rugged Indiana Jones type. Whereas really part of what's kind of cool about the book series is he is more of a quiet, not particularly like remarkable looking man who's just incredibly competent and knows how to survive and does the
Right.
right thing at the right time, which honestly is part of what makes him really cool for me as a role model is that I don't have to look like Henry Curtis or be an English lord because that's the other part. He's an English lord. He's the prototypical, you expect this story to be about him.
Yeah.
But Alan Quartermain is a 60-year-old man who is the best shot in Africa, and he's the main character of the story.
Yeah. Well, and that lines up so much with your whole podcast. I started at the very beginning and I'm working my way up. And I love even just like when it's 5 minutes, but it just talks about being prepared for any situation. And that really resonates with what you were saying about Alan. Like he's almost a hero of last resort, right? Like you even get
Hmm.
to the prequel books and you can tell that he isn't out here to be a hero. He knows he's good at one thing, and that one thing is hunting. And he's going to make his money doing that. And he can shoot anything, anywhere, anytime. In fact, that's a major plot point of Marie, where he just absolutely guns down things to save people's lives. But it's not even other people. It's like in these weird betting situations he keeps getting himself in. So it's really cool to think like it's almost kind of got that like because there's all the Sherlock Holmes books written by Watson, right? So
Hmm.
it's like it does kind of push into that. This is Quartermain writing about Curtis, but then once you get to know Quartermain, you realize that he was being very modest throughout these books, saying how much of a coward he was. Because anytime there's a situation where he has to step up, he does have the competency to know that he has to, which is something that, like you were saying, is it's great to model off of, and it's something that me and Luke talk about all the time. It's like we always wonder. Every man has the question in his heart: Do I have what it takes? And Quartermain
Hmm.
could confidently say yes because he proved himself over and over again. And even when he was in situations that were bad that he got like the wrong end of, he was able to use those as learning situations. So I think it does speak straight to kind of what man should be, the fighting heart of man even.
And it was really um, an interesting angle, like you said. I when I was reading the character first and like hearing about him, it was shocking that he wasn't what I was used to. Like, you know, they weren't describing how absolutely beefcake he was and anything like that. He was very casual, very like understated. Um, but like you said, it was the competence that came out first. It was really early on in the book, that big game hunting scene when the character, I forget the character's name, but he like slips and falls, and he was like, it's because of the shoes he was wearing that he couldn't get away from that guy. So like it was cool that they break down his intelligence and like yeah, his competence and what he does. I thought that was awesome. And then as I'm learning now that he was in his 60s, it makes that kind of like casual, calm demeanor he has make a little bit more sense and have some context. But it's yeah, I don't know why we don't do that more often. We do have like older man heroes. Like I even have one in my book, but I always make them units. You know, they're always units. They're always beasts. And to have someone be more of the everyman that we can uh, look up to. That's a great thing. I love that we have that. I'm learning and discovering this character for the first time. So like I have these stories to look forward to for the first time.
Yeah. To that point though, because of how he is framed, they do have a different pace than like
Mm-hmm.
a lot more of the pulp adventure stuff, which is very like quick to the action, quick to the fighting. There is a lot more, and that's also why I beg the question: is this more classic literature or pulp adventure? Because there is a very kind of slow and methodical plot build up, and then maybe like halfway to three quarters of the way through, you're really just pedal to the metal there with a big reveal in King Solomon's mines, and then there was that whole end sequence with the queens and everything in Quartermain, which was crazy. So I would say if you viewer, if you watch this and are like, okay, cool, I've got another Rambo book to read, or I've got another like Matt Helm or uh, anyone we've talked about, like this is going to be a shot for shot Indiana Jones book I'm reading. It is going to be different, and that's to your point. I mean, we're following a 60-year-old man, so there is you got to keep your expectations kind of screwed down for this one.
I started rereading Mary because you had mentioned that you're reading it, Nathaniel.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that surprised me was just how much H. Rider Haggard uses exposition to describe what's happening, which just
Uh-huh.
it feels so counterintuitive, but it kind of works because it's Quartermain telling you about what happened. Like he's describing the events, but
Mm-hmm.
then also giving his little asides as
Yeah.
to what's going on in the events. So it is something that people should go into expecting it's different. It's not when you read a Matt Helm story.
Yeah.
It definitely has a different pace, but I think it's well worth the exploration.
Yeah,
It's,
even as
go
oh, go
ahead,
ahead,
Luke.
Nathaniel.
No, you
Okay,
too.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, I think as a writer too, it's an interesting like learning point for me as well, where there are so many different ways to tell stories. We talked about Dumas a little bit earlier, and reading um, Count of Monte Cristo for the first time, he would like call out the reader. He'd be like,
Mhm.
if the reader's familiar with this, and I was like, well, whoa, you can't do that, but I guess you can do that. And so same thing with Haggard's book, where in King Solomon's Mines, where it just kind of opens up from the start of him being like, essentially, this is a travel log, and the context we're getting of the story is him like writing a journal almost. So he's
Mhm.
not even trying to write this best-selling thriller. He's telling you what happened, so it is paced and structured different inherently from what it is and how that story is being told. So if you are able to make that mindset shift of like, okay, I almost got my hands on this like lost diary of this badass guy, it makes it read just as intensely, and like you'll be just as focused and in on it. It just won't be the same flavor. So it was really cool. Again, going back to how unique it is. And I know it's like, the grandfather of all of these stories, but yeah, it's not doing the same thing. It's not even they didn't copy it directly. He still stands as his own distinct thing.
Right. Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is like it almost broke my mind thinking of my own writing because I write my main kind of like short stories in a first person perspective. And so
Mhm.
for him, they give you such a good world where it makes sense for him he is writing a journal. He's literally dictating his adventures. So when he pulls you out to explain something that happened like years before that gives context to this, you're not like jarred. But then I think like, well, now do I need to give context to why I'm writing in the first person? Like I was like, everything I've written is ruined now because I don't know why I'm like, under what circumstances the reader going to believe, like, am I just, is this what's going on in my mind if I'm the character? Like what's happening anymore? So that was something that I'm still not sure what to think after reading H. Rider Haggard's perfect first person narrative.
Well, and that's the crazy part about some of these. Like Marie starts with these are like from the files that we found when I
Yeah.
was his intestate. I feel the public needs to know this story written by him. And I think the first one, I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one, they make a comment about this is a story about men. There are no women
Yeah.
because women only ruin stories is basically what he says. And you're like, oh, wow, this is funny.
Yeah, this is wild. Well,
I
that's the other
find
thing too, is like, oh man, I was thinking about this exact thing that you just mentioned. It's like it's literally crazy that he's just dictating these adventures and we're coming along for the journey. And it makes it's so good that I started thinking, are these actually true stories? Like
Hmm.
they pulled me into the point where I was like, was H. Rider Haggard his like pen name, and was Alan Quartermain actually writing these? Because that's what the asides do so well is he makes it very historical, and
Hmm.
it's so blended with the it really takes the historical fiction to the next level where you're wondering, is this just actually history? And I mean, who am I to say that in 1885 three studs didn't go into Africa and find King Solomon's mines? And then H. Rider Haggard was like, no one's going to believe me. I'll just write this book and publish it. And it was actually his memoirs. So it does read like memoirs almost. So it's very interesting that it works so well.
And Haggard, I'm not sure again how much of a dive you guys did on his history. He worked for like the colonial government in uh South Africa for a number of years.
that's
So like
awesome.
a lot of the contextual elements, the audiobook version of Mary that I was listening to had a full note on the beginning of it. Hey, he lived through the Boer War bit here that he's talking about.
Wow.
So he was able to incorporate some firsthand experience of watching these events.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's
Now,
wild to me.
go ahead, Luke.
No, no, go ahead with your point. Mine's not that interesting.
Um, well, this is going to shift topic a tiny bit, but when I
Hmm.
was reading uh, Alan Quartermain or listening to it, I was struck with the thought that it's very much even King Solomon's Mines. I don't know. Have you guys ever read much Edgar Rice Burroughs?
Edgar Rice Burroughs? No.
I need to. I've heard a couple of people make a reference that these two things
Yeah,
have Rider Haggard influenced Burroughs or
yeah.
Burroughs influenced Haggard. I can't remember
It
which.
was Haggard influenced Burroughs, and I
Mhm.
remember so the second one is basically at 63, Alan's like, we should go try and find. Apparently, there's like a lost tribe of white people in Africa. And it's like, no one believes that it's true, but maybe it is true. Why don't we go try and find it? Like, I wish I had the type of money to go wander through Africa to find the lost tribe of white people. That would be sick. Maybe when I'm 63, we'll see. Well, check back in 40 some years, we'll see how, or 30 some years, we'll see how it goes. But I remember thinking that that was very reminiscent of some of the John Carter stuff, which
Mhm.
is was super interesting to me. So John Carter is on Mars, but it almost seemed like Burroughs wanted to write kind of Haggard-esque stuff, but he didn't want to have it as close to home and as close to reality. So there is
Mhm.
also like three different tribes on Mars. It's a white people and then a black people, not like African American type of black, like they're literally like ink black type of situation. And then there's the red people, which are the ones that uh Deja Deja Thoris, I think that's her name. She's the princess of Mars. She is a red person. And so there's very interesting kind of like thematic similarities between the two of them, but you may end up liking Burroughs stuff a little more because it has a lot more of that swashbuckling
Mhm.
pace. And when you keep in mind, because I know Luke and I have talked a little bit about sci-fi personally, and it can be kind of hard to invest in sci-fi as much because it's
Mhm.
so far from reality. But if you keep in mind that this is Burroughs kind of mimicking Haggard's Africa stuff, it almost falls into place a lot better. And so John Carter's great series. Tarzan's also very fun, but my personal favorite are the Mucker. There's two Mucker books, and they're actually him writing like just plain men's adventure fiction. There's no hijinks or crazy stuff or hard to believe things that really happen.
Yeah, I have to check that out still. The Mucker I've gotten recommended from you and a few other people, so that's one I need to add to the list. I'm just getting into Robert E. Howard, so I'm like slowly working my
Ooh.
way through the bigger names of the
I
alt
have read
genres.
very little Robert E. Howard, so you read Burroughs, I read Howard, and we'll meet
Yeah,
in them.
we'll flop here.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think we covered a lot of Quartermain that there is to cover. Definitely check them out if you haven't, and if you have and you haven't checked out Burroughs, check that out and see if you can see the parallels. I think you'll enjoy both of them very much. Both kind of godfathers, pinnacles of men's
Mhm.
adventure fiction. Um, very good at the exploring new worlds where everything's different, and then kind of almost falling back from. In John Carter, they have laser blasters sometimes and swords other times, and Quartermain they've got rifles sometimes, and then literal just medieval warfare other times. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, the time
But
period is great.
yeah, it is. Um,
I do have to share one factoid before we go
yeah.
about Alan Quatermain. Have you guys heard the theory that Alan Quatermain is the grandfather of James Bond and Indiana Jones?
What?
No.
No.
So, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is the film that stars Sean Connery as Alan Quatermain, which is the best part of the movie, the only part of the movie worth watching. But he plays in the comics, apparently because he's kind of got a Scottish connection. The idea is like his son married a Bond. Somehow we get Andrew Bond is like his grandson or
What?
cousin, something like that. This is a family connection they made in the comic book, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Then we get Connery playing Alan Quatermain. Connery also plays James Bond. Connery
No
also
way.
plays Indy's dad. So the Connery connection, I think, reinforces this idea that was set out in the comic book. So I
That's
just need
crazy.
to share that with people. This
That's
is how
super
it all
interesting.
ties together.
So not only is he the godfather of men's adventure fiction, he's also the father and grandfather.
That's amazing. I've vaguely saw that movie playing in the background, like as a kid, when my parents were watching it or something. Is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in that thing too? What a
Yes.
wild movie that must be. You know what I mean? Alan
Yeah.
Quartermain connections, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde connections.
I have also never seen it. Maybe we'll have to. I don't know.
Throw that on.
You didn't give it a great pitch of saying Sean Connery is the only thing to look forward to.
We can watch it on Suit Up Podcast.
All
People
right.
can look forward to that.
That sounds
Perfect.
good. So can we jump into One Man's Treasure? We'll talk a little bit about this
Oh,
before we head into
absolutely.
anything else. Awesome.
One Man's Treasure available on June. It's not June, September 3rd. Guys, time gets wonky the older you get, in case you know this already. One Man's Treasure, two brothers, they find a treasure map. What better way to spend quality time together than go on a hastily put together trip to a Caribbean island? How could things go wrong? We have modern day pirates. We have a jilted former flame. We have not but one, but two contrived sword fights that
Oh
are
yeah.
well worth the price of admission. And a cool little bonus that I'm putting in is there was an alternate cover that I almost went
Oh,
with.
very cool.
What I'm doing is I'll have a link in the back of the book that people can go there and get a copy of the alternative artwork, sent to them an exclusive sneak peek.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, that is
Yeah, this
awesome.
book, again, when we're talking about doing things a little differently, the modern setting is a different flavor. especially for me in the men's adventure fiction world. So it gives you something new to look at, new obstacles, new enemies, new challenges. So I really liked the setting to put it in
Yeah.
modern day and still have it be classic men's adventure fiction. That's so good. So you guys have to pick this up if you're a fan of anything we've been talking about, anything on this podcast. And if you're a fan of great pulp art, because I know I'm a big guy who collects artwork, great cover, incredible cover on this
Thank
thing.
you.
Yeah, it is a
Victor
spectacular
Marsain.
cover. Nice. We'll have to.
Awesome.
We'll have to. Is he on Instagram? Do you know?
He's on Instagram. I
You don't have
also
to remember his name. We can just link it in the show notes. And
perfect.
yeah. So my first thought is like, what can you name? You talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but what are like some things that inspired you to write this?
Definitely Swiss Family Robinson played
Okay.
a hand in it. Treasure
Is that
Island,
the book or the movie?
the Disney film
Yeah, with
specifically.
that movie's so good. I love that growing up.
It's so good. Talk about something that just like hits the right buttons at the right age. You're like, yes, this is
Hmm.
exactly what I need. Because it has pirates show up, and then we also have. I'm a big fan of Captain Blood, the Errol Flynn film. So that is the reason why they're like the backstory of the book is that the crown of the Caribbean was stolen by a pirate and then buried. I kind of have Captain Blood as like my version in my head of this is what this guy was, and
Very
this is kind
cool.
of his story. And he falls in love with like the Spanish princess, and this is all the legend that the brother that believes in the treasure map reads about.
Nice.
And then Treasure Journey to the Center of the Earth is one of my all-time favorite books. And it has that thing where they discover the treasure map, and that's like the first part of the book. And
Very
that's where I
cool.
was like, okay, we're gonna try dropping a bit of that flavor
Yeah.
here. Also, the Hardy Boys. You made a comment about the two different alternating
Yeah.
perspectives. There was a version of the Hardy Boys that came out in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, where every chapter alternated between each brother.
That's cool.
And I was like, I like that. I enjoyed that. I think it gives you a good way of giving the full story and hiding some things from some characters and presenting things to other characters.
Yeah.
Dramatic irony. I can finally remember that term, right? Used very well in this story.
Yeah. It's a very enjoyable read. I have not finished it yet because I don't remember when it got here. It was only like 2-ish weeks ago, but it's got me hooked, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. But yeah, definitely it released 2 days ago, so check it out, buy it, make this a bestseller, you guys. Um, should we dive into piece of gear?
I think so. I think it's
Ooh.
about time.
All right.
So we gotta be generous. Let the guests go first, right? Let's see what you got as your piece of gear, my friend.
So I'm gonna pick something that is kind of a little ridiculous because anyone that knows me knows I get lost really easily. I would pick a compass because like
Ooh.
just I get lost within my own hometown. I'm terrible with directions, but the oddly enough, the thing that I've enjoyed most in my car is that it has the compass on it.
Oh
As
yeah,
long as I know when I was in the backwoods of nowhere and could get no cell service, if I'm headed this direction, I know where the major highway or interstate is on an adventure. If at least I've looked at the map before and I know roughly where I'm supposed to be headed, as long as I have that compass, I could actually make it.
Well, that very important piece of gear.
yeah,
Having
that's a
a
huge
compass,
one.
orientation, like knowing where you're at, big one. And I'm with you. One of the worst with directions ever. My wife likes to roast me a lot. So anytime we're driving anywhere, and I think I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm turning right, and then it's like, no, no, that will be a terrible mistake. Don't turn right. That's how it works out for me most of the time. So a
How
compass
are
great. Actually,
how are all of us so bad with directions? What are we
uh,
doing?
flop us in any of these adventure fiction novels, we're not gonna make it
Well,
because
we might
simply we
make
don't
it,
know
but
what
we won't make
direction
it to
it
the
is.
treasure.
Yeah, we'll
It,
survive, but we will not know where we're going.
Louis L'Amour said, "Adventure is just a fun name for something that scares you, somethingless in a dark alley." Like, I think that's the thing. We'd get on the adventure because we got lost.
So true.
um, quick story about how bad my sense of direction is. When I was living in Colorado a couple years ago, I went mountain biking with a guy who was in incredible shape. First of all, that was my first mistake. He was also a forward observer for the army, so his whole entire job is just knowing how maps work. And I remember we rode around for a while, and we're like trying to head back. I'm like, so we're going this way, right? He's like, nope, you're actually going to go this way. Pointed the exact opposite direction. I was like, all right, that's over. Just leave me here to die. I can't make it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's me with my friend who was in the army. Same thing. It's like when we're in the woods, and I'm like, I think if we go this way, we go back to the car, and he's just opposite,
he
opposite.
like pokes you by your shoulders
Yeah,
and turns you
this way,
around.
my friend. Um, and I think, good point, Terrence, that Louis L'Amour quote. I've heard that sentiment kind of brought up before where, if we're really looking at what an adventure is, we think fun as the reader, as the viewer. Adventure in real life, it's dangerous. There's got to be an element to I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's the next turn gonna have pop out at me. That is a part of the adventure that we have to embrace more of it, I think, in our lives, and that's where it becomes a helpful tool for growth. Is realizing if you can embrace that adventure of I feel lost, I feel hopeless, but that's okay. We're just keep taking these steps. We're gonna find that treasure. That's a good mindset to have. That's a better mindset than panicking and sitting there and waiting because metaphorically you're just gonna die of dehydration without food. You got to keep moving forward. You got to keep moving in some direction.
Yeah, dude. Well said.
So you're a piece
Good.
of gear, my friend.
Yeah, yeah. This one, I'm not sure how necessarily practical it is, but I'm going to go with a dive watch. I
Ooh.
I personally do not dive yet, but it's also I feel like a dive watch is the perfect combination of class and actual like rugged capability. This is 200 meters water resistant, so I could go swim for days and it would never have anything wrong with it. It's got a screw down crown, so no water is going to seep in there. Uh, Super important to be able to tell time. It also has let me show you, a rotating bezel. So if I'm
Hmm.
ever like it would be used for diving, so you can put it at the right time when you're going to run out of oxygen or going to need to surface. But it could also be good for on some sort of adventure if I want to like I don't know if I send someone off to go find supplies and they don't come back by the time my watch gets to where I move my bezel, I know I need to go look for them. So I think it also just dresses up any outfit that you wear. If you wear in a t-shirt and jeans, you throw on a nice dive watch, you look much more put together. So I think that's what I got to go with.
I'm a big James Bond fan. Shocker, picture of me doing the 007 stand in the background. One of the things that they've pushed in the movies, partly for product placement, but also because it does make sense, is that Bond usually wears a dive watch.
Yeah,
I think the Omega Seamaster is the one that they like typically use in the Craig films,
right.
but like that is it works perfectly because it's a competent piece of classy dress wear. And so just aces.
Yeah, so good. And for me, I'm wearing my dive watch, just so it happens to be as well today. I'm not going to tell you how far I can go underwater because it'll make me even look more foolish. But I got it because it's like my homage to the Dirk Pitt watch. It's not orange
Mm.
face. I need to get the orange
Very
face
cool.
one, but it's blue. But yeah, that's another one where my wife will like to point out that you don't dive at all. So why would you need that level of water resistance? And I'm like, well, because it's got a blue face. It's like the color, Dirk
Mhm.
Pitt. So that's the only reason I have it for now. So maybe, like you said, Nathaniel, maybe I'll dive in the future, and this bad boy wouldn't be needed at that point.
Mhm.
Imagine you're about your daily life, right? Everything's normal. All of a sudden, you get kidnapped. You have some
Yes.
sort of information in your head that's going to lead to the treasure. They take you to South America. You have to dive. You're
I'm ready
prepared.
to go. Keep
Otherwise,
it
you would have had to leave your watch behind. Then
right
you could run out of oxygen and not even know it.
and
Well,
not look classy as I'm.
you you would know you ran out of oxygen, but it would be you'd find out the hard way.
Absolutely.
Luke does a really great every once in a while on his Instagram. He'll do the watches of men's adventure
Mm,
fiction, and that's very
Mm.
appreciate
fun.
that.
You may want to go look through the past ones. I know you had Magnum up there once, right? He's
Oh
right there
yeah,
behind you. He's got
Magnum is
that.
on there.
It's the Pepsi can Rolex.
Yeah, dude.
Man,
The watches in the Magnum series are classic. They've shown up in Jack Car now, things like that.
yeah,
And
that's
how about
true.
um all the leather straps are the ones I was showing this time around.
Yeah.
Where you mentioned
Hmm.
Captain Blood, um, Earl Flynn had a
Oh,
sweet. I don't know where that picture. That's the one picture I don't know where it came from. It might have
I
been a promo.
I think he's
it looks
literally
so
just
sweet.
sailing. I think he
Yeah,
was
it's just
super
his
well known
life.
for being a
Hmm.
badass.
But yeah, he
Being a
had a
womanizer
great.
and a badass. Highly recommend his it's I can't remember the title. His
It's
biography, his
isn't it like my
autobiography is
wicked,
amazing.
wicked ways or something
Yes.
like that?
Highly recommend everyone out there read it.
I need to read that. I listened to a documentary about him as I was driving to Pulp Fest actually, and that was like my introduction to Errol Flynn because I found that movie on
Hmm.
Amazon called In Like Flynn, and I was like, this is so sick. Talk about Raiders clone. Like the first half of that was trying to be Raiders, and then you get boxing and you get the acting experience. I was like, this is sick. And then Nathaniel was sending me some pictures of Errol Flynn and talked about him a little bit, and I was like, okay, I got to learn a little bit more about this guy. So
Yeah.
threw on his documentary as I drove to Pulp Fest and got my introduction.
Yeah, he deserves his own episode one day. So we'll have to
Absolutely.
work back around to him. Um, what have you got for us, Luke? What's your
All
piece of
right.
gear?
So my piece of gear this time is some type of campfire, um, not mug, it's not the right term, but you know what I'm saying, like where you can make
Coffee pot.
cowboy coffee. Yeah, coffee pot. Couldn't think of it.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Percolator.
think of percolator. Perfect. And this one is for espresso, I guess. My friend
Hmm.
just gave this to me. We were working out
Nice.
and he was like, I don't want this. And do you want it? I was like, sure, I'll figure it out. But so this one's particularly for espresso. But anything like this, like a coffee pot, you can put over an open flame
Mhm.
and have outside during camping. Cowboy coffee, in my opinion, is so good. It's stronger, it
Hmm.
tastes better, um, and there's like that rugged connection to you, kind of starting the fire, getting it together. There's just more pride in that cup of coffee than my K cup one. So I enjoy a nice cowboy coffee, and I think everybody should invest in just a little pot you can put over the fire.
Yes and amen.
There's nothing more badass than waking up on a cold morning after you camped and pouring a little bit of coffee and lighting up a cigar or a pipe, dude. It's literally like that's how you connect to your cowboy roots. I don't care if you never touched a horse, never worn a pair of cowboy boots. As soon as you do that, you're locked. And it's like
You'll
it's
grow
too
a mustache like Sam Elliott as soon as you do it.
one
Speaking of
sip.
speaking of cigars, this happened to be in my pocket the whole time, and I was telling Nathaniel I didn't even realize it. Like this thing, I like felt a
he,
crunch, and I was like, "What is that?" And it's just this cigar was chilling with us the entire time.
he
I
keeps that
didn't,
thing on him.
I didn't know where it came from. I thought maybe Nathaniel sent it to me. I'm like, I can't identify where this thing came from, so I went to
You never know when you need to celebrate the birth of a kid.
right. Gotta have it on me. Someone tells me some good news. I'm just okay. Here we go.
Yeah. Dude,
I'm in.
that should have been your piece of gear.
Right.
You always got
Double
that
piece of
thing.
gear. Well, I guess it goes back to your thing. I'm gonna make my coffee. I'm gonna light my
Smoke your
cigar,
cigar.
and this is the gear,
And I can already see your mustache growing. Well done.
right? I gotta stop, or else I'll be stuck with a absolute chonk.
We won't even be able to see. Um, all right. So before we go, we want to know, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. What is your favorite book of all time?
Count of Monte Cristo. Actually, it's really easy for me to say that. Count of
Wow.
Monte Cristo is, in my opinion, the ultimate adventure story. It has everything that you want. Exotic locales, dangerous femme fatales. It has treasure. It has revenge. It has just enough historical fiction to make it sound classy. And 90% of people have never read the Count of Monte Cristo, but they recognize the name.
So
You
good.
can count me as one of the 90%.
I'm currently working through it. It's well beyond what I'm used to reading as far as page length. So I think when I
Huge.
last looked, like 574 pages or something is where I'm at. So I'm like, you would think super far, but about halfway. So it's like
Crazy.
I've got some more to go, but it is like you said, it is engaging and
Mhm.
it's literally everything. And that almost goes back to the being serialized for 2 years in a newspaper. Like he kept it interesting. You're going from I guess I don't want to get into spoilers, but you're getting different locations and you're getting like crazy twists and you're getting different types of adventure as you said,
Mhm.
the treasure being one of them. That's super cool, and I'm loving it so far. I'm sure I'm, you know, a rookie when it comes to the twists and turns and what's going to happen at the end. I've still got half the story to go, so It's exciting.
I have for the last like 10 years, I've read it every year. I think last year was the first year I had not done a read.
That's
It
impressive.
is that good
That's
because it's also
crazy.
that rereadable.
Mm, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I'm sure with over around 1,000 pages, there's going to be something you're going to miss the first time. Now, do you have a favorite character in all men's adventure fiction?
It'd actually be hard pressed not to say that it's Alan Quartermain. Like
Mm,
obviously Indiana Jones is the like archetype, but it's hard to
yeah,
disassociate Indiana Jones from just Harrison Ford being a badass.
right.
So I really think that Alan Quartermain is probably it. Because if I think of the character who A, he inspired everything, and B, he's just fun to be on the adventure with, I'd probably have to go with him.
Very cool.
Awesome answers. Perfect. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. It was an awesome time talking with you. I learned a lot,
You.
especially when you guys were going off about the genre of treasure hunting. I'm gonna rewatch that, take some notes, and do a deep dive because you guys are both really knowledgeable, awesome fellas. So if anybody out there wants to continue the conversation, where can they find you, Terrance?
Go to terrancelayhew.com. There you can find links to all my books, my podcasts. I even have one on agriculture floating somewhere in the ether if you're into that.
Very cool.
The Suit Up podcast, Suit Up with Terrance Layhew, is available on all major podcast platforms, and you can also find my YouTube channel, just Terrance Layhew.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
This was great.
we can't thank you enough for coming on, and we also had an absolute blast being on your show, talking about more Alan
Alan
Quartermain
Quartermain.
and maybe a less pure version of the character, but still incredible
It,
nonetheless.
it's like the line in Raiders Lost Ark, I have fallen from the pure faith of archaeology. In this case, we have the pure faith of Alan Quartermain, and then we have King Solomon's Mines, 1985, which these gentlemen did an amazing job just laughing at with me. So thanks for doing that, guys.
It
Oh,
was so much
anytime.
fun. That was the word, fun. That describes that movie and the podcast time together. So definitely check that out episode out as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Um, Definitely make sure to like, comment what you think of everything going on. Don't hesitate to join the Discord. Terrance is
Mhm.
in there. We're having a blast. Um, we talk about everything and anything you can imagine. So if you want to enjoy it, we're actually kicking around, maybe doing a little bit of like a writing prompt thing where we're
Mm.
gonna send one in and you guys can write short stories. We can figure it out. So who knows? If you want to connect with us, that's one of the best ways to do it. But also follow Terrance on Instagram. That'll be linked below. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you. And you guys, your Discord is amazing. I really enjoy it. People should definitely check it out. It is well worth the just time on there.
Appreciate it. Thank you, man.
All right. See you next
Thank
time.
you so much.